We are on with Tom Lelio. Tom is the author of the Ultimate Jet Guide. Right here, just read the book. It's a quick read. I actually read it one evening, chock full of just great value. And if you're thinking about getting into the jet game, selling the jet game, I highly recommend this book to be your first book to read. I read a couple of books recently on the same subject, and I can tell you that Tom's book is phenomenal. It's really good for someone thinking about getting into this career. So, Tom, I appreciate you being on. Thanks for spending time and adding value to our podcast listeners that may be interested in this stuff.
My pleasure, Ernie. I can't believe you got through it in one day. I mean, it was quite. Maybe I need to up the reading level a little bit.
No, I was chewing on the knowledge. I love reading, so this was a very good book. So, Tom, just to start off, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get started in aviation and all that stuff?
Yeah, 100%. So my name is Tom Lelio. It's kind of a tongue twister, but I got into aviation by happenstance. Actually, I was a youth pastor for over a decade. I've got a graduate degree in systematic theology, and I just kind of always thought that would be my path in life, as just dedicating my life to the church. My wife and I, we've got 5 children, and I grew up in New Jersey. Went to school in Pennsylvania, stayed there for a few years, and now we moved about a little over a decade to Florida, pursuing a job in youth ministry. And so I was a youth minister in Florida for a number of years, and then kind of pivoted over to a music school. I was doing videography and marketing and sales for a local music school for 3 years, and then found aviation because I went to the owner of the music school and I said, "Hey, listen, what's the future hold for me? What's the path? I've got 5 kids." I was starting to get more, I think as you get older, you kind of set bigger goals for yourself and like, hey, what else can I do? And it was just time for me to move on from that school. And so I just went online, Indeed.com, saw a sales job opening.
No kidding.
Found out that it was for aviation, and I thought I was just going to be booking flights at first, but it turns out we were actually selling the jets themselves, and that's where it all began about 4 years ago.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what was that step like, going from youth pastor to music into aviation? Did you have any aviation experience prior to doing that?
No, none. My only aviation experience was I had two experiences. One, I watched the movie Top Gun, the original, just to be clear.
Yes.
And then that led me, when I had seen the movie, I was in about high school, so I was about 16 at the time. That led me to take a discovery flight and try to become a pilot, but found out that I just didn't have the stomach for it. I would smell the avgas, and I know a lot of pilots are like, "Oh, I love the smell of avgas." Yep. Dude, it gave me a headache. So by the time I was done with 3 lessons, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, because every time I go up, I'm just putting myself in misery. So that was my only aviation experience, is failing out of being a pilot. I would go back later on and a couple of years ago get my pilot certification, but at the time, I had no aviation background whatsoever.
Wow. So, man, you're kind of just stepping into this role. And you said when you first applied to it, you thought you were just going to be booking flights. What was that conversation like when the guy's like, "No, you're going to be selling airplanes. This is what you're going to be doing"?
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe people bought and sold and traded aircraft on a regular basis, that you could sustain a living. And I thought you would just always go to the manufacturer. I didn't realize there was a whole pre-owned world out there that you could explore, and that there was a position where you could broker a deal and make a commission out of it. So the biggest thing, when I asked him, well, what's the salary look like? He's like, well, it's all commission. Actually, it started off with a little bit of a stipend to begin with, and then it was all commission once you made your first sale. And he said, our goal here is for you to make 6 figures in your first year. And I was like, dude, I'll just be happy to make 60, because that would be double what I'm making now. So if I can make half of what you're promising me, I'm in. So that it was exciting. And I had a little bit of sales background, but it was mostly Cutco knives in college. It was selling kids to come to church, hang out with Jesus on a Friday instead of going to the football game. It was music lessons, sales and marketing. It wasn't, real high ticket item sales dealing with high net worth individuals.
Right. Right. So with that experience in sales, your experience in sales, how is the difference now? You talked about dealing with high net worth individuals. What approach do you take? Is it the same or is it different?
Yeah. So the boss at the time, he said two things that kind of made a difference to me. Number one, he said they're master sales and negotiators, which is true. High net worth. I mean, you don't get to be in that position without some skills in sales and negotiation. And then number two, he said, sell how you want to be sold to. And I think those two things really made a big difference for me because, a lot of sales positions, you get handed a script and it's like, off you go. And I know people hem and haw at the script, I just want to be me and that sort of a thing. And there's a place for that. But the script was really helpful because it was a template. But after a few weeks, when he said, sell how you want to be sold to, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to change this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to change my tone. I'm going to say these different things. And it took the pressure off of me to feel like I had to sell a high net worth individual. I had to sell a master negotiator and salesman. And it took the pressure off because now I could just be myself. And if they were attracted to that, this idea of your vibe attracts your tribe, there was more than enough jet owners in the citation world that I connected with it. They were blue collar, white collar, family guys, owner operators. They like to kind of get their hands dirty and become pilots themselves. I could relate to them. And so I could joke with them. I could share, the fact that I was a youth pastor before with them. And that was good, And so I think those two things were really helpful, especially starting off.
I think creating that, it's sales where you're creating that relationship with that person and you're
right.
cultivating that relationship because ultimately they're going to trust you to buy a, $1 to $10 million airplane, sometimes even more. That's a big trust. That's a lot to give to, not just one person. You are part of a team, but still that owner is giving, quite a bit of money to purchase this asset, which could go sideways if it's done incorrectly. So, I tell
my team all that all the time. Like what you're trying to do is really hard. You're calling a random stranger and being like, "Hey, you don't know me, but I want to sell your $1 million asset." Like that's a big ask. So we really need to train to make that as successful as possible for both sides.
Right. So youth pastor, music. Now you're into sales. Tell me what the first experience was like selling an airplane. Did you go straight into to selling, or were you doing data research initially and then moving into more of the sales portion?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't realize there was a rung on the ladder below salesperson where you're just kind of getting your feet wet as a research or data analyzer, that sort of a thing. No, they threw us into the deep end, and I'm thankful that they did. At first I started out with Citation 560s. At the time they were sub-$1 million jets. Now they're almost double that. Crazy, how the market has changed. Yeah. But I got my teeth kicked in for about 2 weeks, and what I mean by that is a lot of voicemails, a lot of gatekeepers. I wasn't talking with the decision makers. When I talked to the decision maker, I distinctly remember somebody calling me out and saying to me, "Well, it sounds like you have no experience whatsoever. I just got my ELT replaced, and I bet you don't even know what an ELT is." Click.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, dang.
Wow.
Okay. Which he was right. I had no idea what the ELT was at the time.
Right.
But, so I struggled and my manager kind of pulled me aside and said, we're going to shift markets. And so we went to the older 501s. Uh-huh. And I started having more success with that because it was owner operators, a little bit of a smaller, price point. They were about $500,000 at the time, maybe a little bit less. And so I connected with the owner operators. They were usually on their way up to a Citation 5 or a 2 or an S2 or maybe even a CJ, something bigger. So they were moving up, whereas the 5 owners, and this is kind of the thing with some markets is that sometimes these manufacturers made the planes too nice. They fit the mission, and it's like, there's no need to upgrade. They don't have the Apple mindset of like planned obsolescence. It's like, come on, guys, you made it too good. Right. Maybe they do now. I don't know on the newer ones, but I started having more success in the 501s, and so I remember my first sale. It was about 3 months in, and what happened was when it went to pre-buy, a mechanic knocked over a nitrogen canister and it shot off the top, and the projectile punctured a hole in the nose of the jet. And so I get this phone call and I'm like, wait, what? Like, I didn't know that could happen. Like, what are we talking about here? And so fortunately enough, it was small enough they could patch it up. That buyer did not buy the jet, but fortunately we had a backup buyer lined up who stepped in right away, and we had our first close. But it's funny, like, you always remember that first, and even one of the guys on my team now, he just closed his first jet about a month ago. And it was just watching, it was funny. It's like every step of the way, like there was something else was popping up. Oh, there's a lien we didn't know about. Oh, there's logbooks missing we didn't know about. They found them. Oh, the shop found this wrong with it. That's another 20 grand. Oh, it's got a fuel leak, 30 grand. And just, like everything. Oh, there's a snowstorm. Everything's finally ready to go, but escrow's in the middle of a snowstorm. So we have to delay closing even more. And it's just like, oh my gosh. That's one of the cool things about aviation, is that there's always something going on. It's very exciting. And if you can roll with the punches, it can be very exciting for you.
Now, so with all that experience, you kind of be getting thrown into the deep end. Was that kind of the catalyst to writing the Ultimate Jet Guide? What was the I guess the influence in writing the book? So you can teach others or business owners and owners of airplanes that want to purchase. Who is the target audience for the book?
Yeah. So about a year into selling jets, I was getting a lot of the same questions. And having been doing a lot of sales and marketing for the music school and the music ministry, I've always had that creative bug. I like producing content. I like editing videos and things of that nature. So I was getting a lot of the same questions. So I'm like, all right, I'll just make a YouTube channel that answers these questions. And I don't need to become YouTube famous, get a platinum play button or anything like that. It's just an archive of content so that when you call me and you ask me a question, I can just send you a video and I'll answer your question. And that'll, hopefully, gain some authority and help gain some trust from the person that I'm sending the video to. So the Ultimate Jet Guide started as a YouTube channel. And if you fast forward to when I started my own brokerage, I was just thinking about it, like, oh, it would be great if I had a physical book or something that I can share with people, because some people don't like YouTube, they're readers. And that's where it kind of came out. And it was really, it's about educating first time or, uneducated buyers on how to buy a private jet. So we go through, well, should you charter first? Should you buy? Should you fractional? Should you invest? Because that's been a big thing as of late. So that's really where it came from. It's just answering questions that I was getting. It started as a YouTube channel, and then finally I sat down to write it.
Now, you also have a brokerage, aircraft broker training course as well that you have. Is that correct?
Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, I left the brokerage where I started and started my own brokerage, and with the intention to just do what I had been doing, sell private jets on my own. So, I didn't have a book of business. I didn't take any clients with me or anything. So I was starting from scratch. And so what I knew was, money follows attention. And I just needed to get people's attention. So I really leaned into the content marketing, started to do even more with YouTube, more with social media. And people started asking me like, well, Tom, how did you become a jet broker? And I'm like, oh, why is everybody asking me about how to become a jet broker? Like, I'm trying to sell you a jet, but all the people that are talking to me are people who want to become jet brokers. Like, this is not right. Yeah. And they kept asking me, and I was like, well, okay, here's how I did it. And I just thought to myself, like, there's an opportunity here. Like, I can train you to be a broker. Like that's fine. And so I opened up the brokerage. And what was really cool about it was I was like, oh my gosh, like there's no license, there's no certification to become a broker. I can make this business model however I want. And so I took a lot of lessons that I learned from the old brokerage, and what I always wanted in a brokerage, and I created what I think is the first cloud-based agent-first private jet brokerage in the world. And that
And describe
agent-first
that
thing was really important to me.
Describe that cloud base.
So we're cloud-based because you don't have to move to Sarasota to hang out and be a jet broker in an office here. So we've got brokers that are in Miami, California, Colorado, New York, and we even got a broker right now that's working overseas.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Very cool. So now I cut you off. You were talking about that's agent centric or broker centric.
Yeah. When I looked around at different brokerages, it almost seemed like, you become a top salesman and then you kind of moved on and made your own brokerage and found other people that you could train. And it was just kind of like a cycle. Mm-hmm. And I had been in organizations where it was all about the organization and not the individual. Right? Not the individual employees, if you will. It was all about either the top person, the owner, or just about the business. And you were expendable because it was just what was best for the business. And so I wanted to make a brokerage that was what's in the best interest of the agents that work there. The customers are important too, but I think if you take care of the agents first, they will naturally take care of the clients themselves. So we do things like our commission is tiered. So the more you sell, the more you make. It's cloud-based, so you don't have to move to Sarasota. There's less required of you to do that. And like I said, the commission structure, we provide all the resources for you, from documents to marketing. We try to make it as accessible for you as possible. At the end of the day, you still have to do work, right? But I think it's a unique model that I'm really excited to see continuing to grow, as we get bigger.
That's interesting. I love that model. At some of the places that I've worked, it was always stressed that if you take care of the customer and your employees, they will take care. Well, if you take care of the employees, they will take care of the customer, which will, bring you more business and grow your business. So I always believed in that. I can't believe there's companies out there that do not do that. It's always kind of boggled my mind because it seems like that's just that's a level up. You get employees bought in. You take care of them, you develop them, you truly care for them. They're going to work. They're going to have such brand loyalty to your company, to their company, as they say it, to grow the company. So I just think that's something that should be a no-brainer to a lot of people. So getting into the book, well, first, let me ask someone watching this podcast or listening to this podcast right now, and they want to get into being a jet broker. They're maybe flying airplanes. They're like, this is fun. I'd love to do this, but it would be cool to sell airplanes and sell private jets. Where do they start? What would be your advice?
I think that if you don't have any aviation background, I think it all starts with mindset. When it comes to being a jet broker, you need to have a mindset that you can discipline your disappointments, because you're going to face disappointments all day long. I think mindset is important. I think understanding how you relate to other people, because you can't do this by yourself. It's a people business. You need to relate to the clients. You need to relate to your team. You need to relate to other brokers and other people like pilots, like mechanics, like escrow agents. So you need to understand you have to have a mindset. You have to have self-awareness to see how you communicate with others and work on those skills. Those are all skills you can work out on your own. Once you kind of get that under your belt, I think learning about aviation is obviously important. But what I found when I first started is there wasn't really a place to go to find out about how to be a jet broker. Fortunately, now I think there's a few more resources, the Ultimate Jet Guide being one, Aircraft Broker Academy being another one. And there's a few more voices on YouTube and on the internet that are sharing this information. But a couple of the videos that I posted of how to get started without, anything, you go to controller.com, go to Trade a Plane, see what the markets are doing. Check out AvBuyer, Global Air. These are all marketplaces and great places to find industry news. AIN Online's another one. All of these places. And then once you go there, just look around and see who's the author, who's the broker, who's being featured in this. And then go talk to people. LinkedIn has been fantastic for aviation. Yeah. You can really connect with a lot of people in the industry, and then just keep talking to people. And if you can, find a community online, whether it's a Facebook group of citation pilots or a LinkedIn group, or, we've got our JetLife Aero Circle app for aspiring brokers. So it's mindset, it's understanding, the communication, your communication style, self-awareness, and then it's going to go get the knowledge and find people that will invest their time, energy, and effort into helping you get the knowledge. And I think the biggest thing is just don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to pick up the phone and cold call somebody has to be it's not natural, but you have to get to being almost as natural as possible. It's a scary leap, but once you start doing it, you, like you said, you develop the habit. I think that was the biggest thing for me when I started selling private jets was, okay, I've got this list that I'm going to go through, and I'm just going to cold call people. That's scary, So,
yeah. And that's one of the nice things, like finding a brokerage that you can work with. When I was with another broker, like it was nice being in the office because you saw, okay, guys, everyone make a phone call. So you saw everyone making phone calls. We try to do that with JetLife Aero, where every morning we have a meeting with the guys, for 30 minutes. And sometimes it's sales training, sometimes it's market updates, sometimes it's role playing. But staying connected to a community is huge. To try to do it on your own, it's very difficult.
Very difficult. Very difficult. Anyways, let's get into the book, man. I really recommend this book. So the Ultimate Jet Guide, you kind of start off in a very good spot. So I'm not going to go over the entire book, but we'll just take little bits and pieces that I found super interesting. Number one was, kind of one of the real reasons people buy airplanes, especially private jets. There's the Instagram, the IG stuff of, and the TikToks of, fabulous people getting on with, champagne and this and that. And there may be 0.001% of the people that do that. The other percentage that I've found, at least in my experience, are business owners that need to go somewhere to get business done and come back home so they can see their kids' soccer game. It's a business tool. And then number two, it's a tax advantage tool. Is that kind of the same thing that you saw? You did mention tax advantage being 99% of the clients that they're saying they're using the acquisition of their private jet as a tax play.
Well, yeah, I think you'd be foolish not to, even if the number one reason you're getting it is for business as a time machine. Why not take advantage of the tax deduction as well? I think I had one client, just tell me, like, Tom, like, we only have so much time. It's my most valuable resource. I'm going to spend the money to make sure that my time is used wisely. And I always tell people buying a private jet's not going to necessarily make sense on paper, unless you're one of the few people that, they can afford, that, and then their time literally is worth $10,000 an hour. In fact, when I was talking to Gary Vaynerchuk on his Tea with Gary V podcast, he's like, yeah, this doesn't make sense for anyone unless your time is really that valuable, right? People are paying you that much so that spending $20,000 to travel, well, your time's $10,000 an hour. It takes you 2 hours. Okay, well, then it makes sense. But what this other client was explaining to me was, my time is worth the exchange of that money. Like, even if my time isn't worth, $10,000 an hour, my kids are, my quality of life is, my business and what it can do is. And so it may not make sense on paper, but it makes sense, in the heart, or where it really matters, if you will.
Right.
So I think that's an important distinction to make when you're looking at private jets, and not to mention the fact that a lot of times the jets that I'm working with, the acquisition isn't as big because they're older jets. So their primary depreciation that happens in the first 5-10 years of its life, like it's already taken that big hit. So when you look at it from that perspective, that the acquisition cost of the jet is not as big as it would be if you were buying a brand new $10-20 million jet. Okay, well, I mean, these guys have houses like $1 million jet, $500,000 jet. I mean, they have houses that are $10 million. So it's like,
Right.
this is nothing here.
Yeah. On the point of saving times, this kind of came up. It brought me back to, being an airline pilot and, going through TSA and security, right? That's one of our biggest hassles. It's the biggest hassle for our passengers, but necessary. Obviously, in a private jet, you don't. I do remember going through security in Las Vegas one time, and I remember seeing in the bin, this was back when even, all the crew had to go through security. And I was putting my, stuff in the bin, and I looked in the bin, and it was a Wheels Up advertisement. And I thought it was the best. Like it was a marketing ninja on that, because you take it, the worst pain point for someone who can afford it. They look at this bin and they're going like, you could avoid all this, right? Come to right. I thought it was great, but having that time savings, especially with delays and, overcrowded airports and all that stuff, that is a huge part of it. It's not just the glam of traveling on a private jet. It is literally, like you said, saving time, because time is your most important resource. And where would you rather spend that time? In a crowded airline terminal, or driving up, hopping on your airplane? That airplane is taxiing within 5 minutes, getting to your destination, doing your business meeting or whatever it is, and getting back in time for dinner. That was the biggest thing for me. I don't own a private jet. I own a Cirrus, but I operate it the same way. Like if I have
100%.
I'll fly out to Carlsbad. We'll do the meeting, and then I'll fly back home because my daughter has gymnastics in the evening, and I'm going to make gymnastics. So
well, that's just it. It puts you in charge of your own schedule, as opposed to having to depend on an airline schedule that might not work for you. It might be too late. It might be too early. It might be delayed. Here, you're controlling the controllables. You're taking control of one more element of reality, and that's time.
Yeah. The time aspect for it, at least for me, I hope to be in that tax problem issue later on down the road. But for me, it's all about time. And I think that was a solid hit on that. Chapter 2 in your book, you mentioned, should you buy or should you rent a private jet? And I know in the markets that we deal with, we're in the light jet market as well. A lot of these folks have not flown on a private jet, but just a couple of times. Right. And I'm very shocked about that. So you have in here just a little bit in the book. It's a good litmus test to see if you have the stomach to spend $20,000 getting to your destination instead of less than a tenth of that flying commercial. I think there's this misnomer out there about flying private is almost about the cost of a first class ticket. And that is probably the biggest myth out there that at least we get when people call us up for charter. Is that kind of
there's definitely a bigger gap between first class and renting or flying a private jet than people will give it credit for. And I think I see where it makes sense, because if you have a party of 8 and you're going to spend $2,000 to fly your whole family, right now we're at 16,000. Okay. Like, for example, my family, we're a party of 7. So I chartered a jet to go from Florida to Tennessee for a family vacation. And that was the first story in the book. And that was roughly $15,000, $20,000. And so if I was trying to do a first class ticket, and then let's say a first class ticket was $2,000 a pop, I mean, now I'm at $16,000. So, I mean, I guess you could make the math work, but yeah, especially for one person, no, a first class ticket is going to be a tenth of what you're going to pay for a whole entire jet to yourself.
Right. Do you find a lot of families, a lot of owners buying jets for that reason? They have big families. Maybe they want to take their family on vacations a little bit more, and then use the fringe benefits of using this for a business play as well.
Well, I would probably flip flop it, especially if Uncle Sam's listening, like it's a business jet.
Correct.
It's definitely a business jet that
Yep.
that the family sometimes will be able to take advantage of it when the owner's going on a business trip, the family can hop on. But it's definitely something that once you buy it, you're like, you find all these opportunities, whether it's family, friends, dogs, pets, that sort of a thing. Charity opportunities arise, medical or one-off things like emergencies, if you will. They're not really medical emergencies, but for example, like my mom lives in New Jersey, I'm in Florida. So, if God forbid something happened to her up in New Jersey, then I could hop on my jet for a medical thing, to go visit my mom. And I've seen that happen where, if there was a family emergency and because they had access to jet, either they could go where they needed to go or they could bring somebody to the family that otherwise would not have been able to make it.
Right. Yep. I agree 100%. Key takeaway here. If you've never flown private, start by chartering.
Yep.
I think before I put on there a must in my my notes. I think before you even consider purchasing a jet, you should be chartering, and not just a one-time experience. Probably you need to be able to shell out that $20,000 because owning a jet, we manage airplanes. If an owner comes up and says, "Hey, I want to go here," hey, great, but we have this inspection that we need to do, and that's about 20 grand. So you got to be able to write that check on that. One of the benefits you talked about chartering is the lower upfront cost. Perhaps the most compelling advantage of chartering is the absence of substantial upfront costs associated with buying an aircraft. Your capital remains free for other investments and experiences. So I think at least in our experience, a lot of times people don't think of everything they need to have paid for on the airplane, such as hangars, pilots, training, insurance. All that is before you fly 1 hour on the airplane. And we like to say that your initial cost can be $500,000 a year just for the airplane to sit in a hangar. When you start flying it, it's going to cost more. So I think another reason for chartering is, hey, start seeing what it's like. Charter is almost like a hook, right? Like the minute you charter a jet, the minute you're in a private jet, trust me, you're not going to want to fly anything else. So it's how do you get there from here as far as, can you afford it? Number one, do you have a tax benefit? Do you have a business application for it? If you can answer those, it's probably a good investment, which is one of your next points in the book is investing in a private jet. Is it worth it?
Yeah. Well, that's the chapter about buying a jet and then handing it over to a charter company or a management company to offset your costs, because maybe you just have that big of a tax bill, or maybe, like you said, you're not going to fly that much. I like to tell people, if you're going to only be flying 50 hours a year or less, just do charter. Avoid the headache of having to, have the newest, have the nicest aircraft, fly the $10 million aircraft for $500,000 a year, if you will, as opposed to, having to buy something from the last century, which I love, by the way, because that's what I sell, the last century jets, but, and then having all the headache and upkeep of it. So if you're flying 50 or less, charter. Once you're between 50 and 100, 125, maybe we're looking at buying and just letting it sit, and you're okay with that. Or you buy, now we're kind of in a weird territory, because if you buy it and you want to give it to a charter company, well, if you're flying 100 hours a year, that means that's 100 hours a year where the aircraft can't make money.
Correct.
Plus the X amount. And let's say, I mean, on the low end, if they're flying at least 100 hours a month, for that, that's another month that's off for maintenance stuff. So you're not giving the charter and management company enough time to try to offset your cost because it's unavailable for them, right, and they need to be able to use it. So, but it is an interesting play. And I actually just did a video because I know there's some people that will, rightly so, caution against buying it and giving it to a charter company. But if you know what you're doing and you're working with someone that can help guide you so that you make an educated decision, it does make sense for a good handful of people.
The ones that I see really making sense, because like you say, 100 hours a year, if you're going to charter it, that's fine. But, or if you're going to use it for yourself, owner, you want to charter it out the rest of the time. Well, guess what? When do you want to use it? I want to leave on Friday,
right?
Right, and I want to come back on Sunday. Well, guess when the prime chartering slots are? Is those exact times. So you're not just losing the hours. I like to tell our clients, you're losing almost the full day, because I'm not sure if I can reposition the airplane for a charter on that. If you have a place somewhere kind of out in the outskirts. So yep, it's hours, but it's also days. Like, you're losing days on those hours as well.
Yeah, holidays and everything, especially too.
Right. Yeah. If you have a private jet,
you get more money. Guess what? You would get more money for your plane if you let other people use it on a holiday when you probably want to use it. So it's like, does this really make sense?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Chapter 3 in the book, you have a full chapter dedicating. I won't go through all of it, but a full chapter of renting a jet step by step. And this is the one thing that I kind of found you on YouTube. How you talk about pulling the curtain back on the stuff. And this is what I liked about the book is you literally go step by step on what each cost is, how to choose it, what it's include excise tax and everything in there, fees, surcharges. So even if you're getting into just chartering an airplane, this is a good book for that. Chapter 3 was great. I started chuckling a little bit on some of the fees on there, because you're right. The fees just add up on some of the charter companies, especially if you have any kind of de-icing. De-icing is very expensive, as you know, crazy. But I think the biggest portion of this book, again, if you don't have it, go out, get it. The Ultimate Jet Guide, get it on Amazon. It came, I think the next day for me. So it was really quick.
Sweet.
Buying a jet step by step, chapter 4. Fantastic. You went through a lot of, and again, I just recently read another book on this subject, and it was not as thorough as your book. So again, kudos to you, talking about how the whole process works, from airframe engine modifications to enrollment and maintenance programs. Some of the things that new owners wouldn't be thinking about. Like, why does that matter? Well, it does matter, right? Inspection schedules, things like that. So the one thing that or I shouldn't say the one thing, but one of the parts of the book that I highlighted and I starred was when you told your clients the following on purchasing a jet: an aggressively priced aircraft available now, but is not a great value. An aggressively priced aircraft that's a great value, but it will take time to find. Or an aircraft that is ready to sell today, is a great value, but it's not cheap. So when we sell or go out to acquire an aircraft for individuals, this is the playbook that we always go by, because the owners want it now, right? Like, hey, I'm ready to spend some money right now. If you're later in the year, it becomes a real critical, hey, right now I need to buy something. So my recommendation, start earlier in the year, by the way. But yeah, this is kind of one of the things. If you have the patience to wait for the right aircraft, you are in the driver's seat. If you don't have the patience for that right aircraft and you need it now, just like you said, it's not going to be a great value, or it'll be a great value, but it's not going to be cheap. So
yep, you're going to pay for it. Yep.
One of the last things in the book that I chuckled a lot at some of the things that you put in the book, because they were spot on.
Well,
You have
you mentioned like I kind of, really spell things out. And I hope that what you found was while we made the reader aware of things to be mindful of, we did it in such a way that it wasn't super technical, so that you as an end user didn't need to be a mechanic. You didn't need to have a pilot's background or a CPA's background to understand the concepts of what was going to be important in any of the process, charter, purchase, investment, whatever it was. So I hope it was accessible. And like you said, there was a little bit of humor in it as well.
Yeah, no, it was great. Again, like I said, knowing a lot of the details behind it, I think you wrote it in a way to where most people will understand it without an aviation background. That's why, people that are just getting into the business of aircraft sales, or maybe they're just curious about it, this book is a great resource because it has so much value. What I found in the past was brokers don't want to really talk about their trade, quote unquote, trade secrets, right? They don't want to pull back the curtain. They want it to be clouded in mystery because, hey, this is kind of my secret sauce and how I do stuff. You kind of just went, hey, I'm pulling back into the entire curtain. Here's what it is. I'm an open book, and this air of transparency is refreshing because it also builds trust. Hey, I'm going to know what you're making on this commission, right? I've agreed to it. I've signed on to it. But I think the value that you bring is far more than the commission that you're charging. This is why.
Yeah.
And you do that by being an open book and being transparent about everything. So chapter 5, investing in a private jet, why jets are a bad investment. I was laughing at this because as an owner of a charter company, a Part 135 company, we own our charter certificate. That is one of the things I think is a big misnomer to people getting into the jet business is, hey, I'm going to buy this airplane. I do have a tax advantage for it. I do have a business use for it, but I want charter to pay for it. And that is a very difficult thing to do. I won't say it's impossible to do, but the parameters all have to be right. You have to have the right jet. That jet cannot be home-based. It has to be in a floating fleet where it's floating all around the country. You're going to have higher costs with pilots because you're going to have to man it a little bit more. So there's a lot of barriers to making that jet pay for itself and cash flow itself. You have in there, if you're looking for a good ROI, this is probably not the asset class for you to be in. And I totally agree with that. Tell me the premise, was that just due to like some of the conversations that you've had in the past with clients on writing that chapter?
Yeah, one of my most popular YouTube videos is how to buy a jet and make, $300,000 a year by chartering it out, because we had a case study where it was possible, and the market was really frothy the last couple of years. So, at the end of the day, it's definitely a common question that I get asked about, but at the end of the day, I think the most important thing with it is that, when you say I want charter to pay for it, it's like, okay, Mr. Buyer, tell me what you mean by that. Does that mean just the fixed cost? Does that mean you get to fly for free because the revenue you take in can offset how much you're going to use it? Does that mean you wanted to take care of fixed cost, you fly for free, and at the end of the day, the company cut you a check? Like, let's have this conversation. What do you mean? And I can show you on paper like what you said, the exact conditions that need to be met in order for you to achieve your goal. Okay, condition 1 to cover the fixed cost, it needs to be this. Okay, condition 2 to cover your travel. Okay, your travel needs to be this, and our availability needs to be this. And then if you want us to write you a check, well, okay, it can't be a big maintenance item year. We have to fly it this many hours. You have to let us use it this many hours, and then we put that, a good reputable charter operator will put all those figures in front of that of the client. And then the client has to make an educated decision on like, okay, yeah, I think this is where I want to go. And I understand that, having a check written to me, like, I'm not going to be able to use it. The plane can't break at all or have a big maintenance year. And the charter market has to demand it enough so that it flies X amount of hours. And then you sit back and think to yourself, can my plane really fly 2,000 hours a year? It's like, no, it can't.
Not a light
And
jet.
now you know. Yeah, exactly. The light jet, exactly.
Right.
You know, and then you talk, and that's what I love about being the broker part of it is I'm operator agnostic. And so when an operator makes the proposal to the client, I just turn to the client and be like, yeah, dude, that's possible. That's really not possible. And I mean, that's only if we're 2 years after a worldwide pandemic and people are throwing stupid money at charters. Like that's the only way that's going to happen. And your plane is flawless and never breaks, even though it's from the last century. Yep. Like those are the conversations I enjoy.
And a landing gear overhaul is coming due. Yeah.
Coming due. Yep. Yep. So, but yeah, I mean, as long as people are having those, like you said, transparency, as long as there's transparency, then I trust my clients as adults to make conversations. And that's usually where I see people critique like, oh, Tom, how can you say this kind of stuff? It's like, well, no, like it's about someone making a business decision and sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. But I wouldn't, just because you fail at being a stockbroker doesn't mean someone can't make money as a stockbroker.
Right.
You know, the same way, just because a lot of people will fail giving their jet to a charter operator to make money, whatever that means, we haven't had that conversation, doesn't mean that you can't make money, whatever that means, by giving your aircraft to a charter operator. So let's just have the conversation.
Yep. Agreed. On the topic of making money, let's get back to guys and gals thinking about getting into this market. What does an average jet broker make, on average for the year, maybe just starting out?
So I can speak to what my, experience was as a first-time jet broker. And I've had 2 first-time experiences, both as starting out with a company that I was working for and then both starting out all on my own. Yeah. And also looking around. So my first year, the goal was $100,000. I hit that goal. And the way that I hit that goal was I sold 20 plus jets that first year, making $5,000 take home of a commission. So that's how it was done. And so the next year I was like, well, I want to bring home more money. I'll just make sure that my commission is higher. So when I negotiate my commission with a seller, I made it higher. So my commission instead of 5,000 average was 10,000. So I doubled my income by just making that adjustment. And then the next year I did the same thing. And, by the year 3, I was bringing in over $500,000 because I was still doing 20 transactions. And the average transaction was take home $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. Now, when I went into business for myself, I would say even though I was taking home 100% of the commission, I hit 6 figures, but a lot of it went back into the business. And so in some ways it's less, because, or in a lot, and I guess in all ways it's less because I had all that overhead. So therein lies the benefit of working with the brokerage. And it depends on the market. 3 years ago, it was starting to be good, and then it got really good, a year or 2 ago. Now we're in a tougher market situation. So I'm probably gonna have to go back to making 20 transactions at 5K as opposed to, 20K. I gotta have to kind of start from scratch again. Right.
Well, again, this book is great. The Ultimate Jet Guide. I can't highly recommend it enough. I mean, especially for those, that watch the channel that want to get into aviation. It's a great resource for people, maybe even looking to be pilots and, do the selling on the side or working for a broker, maybe not full time, getting their hand in it. You never know. I mean, this could be, and I've had a few of my friends go into being jet brokers instead of pursuing the pilot thing. They got their pilot license, they were on that track and decided to do something else, and they love the world and they love the fast pace of it and they love the money of it. So it's a really well-written book, Tom. And any last words you want to give to the podcast on maybe if you're looking at doing something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage you that what's nice about the book is I think it literally does pull back the curtain on private aviation, especially when it comes to how those transactions work. And especially being in aviation, whether you're a pilot, you're a mechanic, you can help facilitate deals. And the degree to which you facilitate the deal can be a paycheck. So, I've got pilots and mechanics that they understand how aviation works and how brokerage works. So they know I'll call Tom if I have a seller that wants to sell the jet. And then in turn, I will reward them with, part of the commission commensurate with how much they've done. So if it's just like a little lead, here you go, maybe that's a couple $1,000s. If it's, you're the mechanic for the seller and you help facilitate the deal like 50% because I'm always talking to you and never talking to the seller, well, maybe you get half the commission. And by understanding how aviation works through the book and through experience, like you can be involved as in the transaction side without having to, quit as a pilot, quit as a mechanic, and set up your own shop as a brokerage. Just be involved in the life and the ecosystem of brokers. And there's always opportunities for people who aren't full time to make money and then find themselves in the middle of a deal where they do make the full commission. So just get involved for sure.
Yeah. It's a fascinating career. It's a fascinating field to be in. You get to talk to a lot of really interesting people, and it's cool. It's private jets, man. It's airplanes. So what's not to like about that, right?
100%.
Well, Tom, I appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining. Thanks for bringing a lot of value to this podcast and getting people excited about private jets. If they want to reach you, Tom, you're at Instagram, Tom Lelio. I keep
Lelio, it's fine.
Lelio, there you go. And you also have a YouTube called The Ultimate Jet Guide on YouTube. I highly recommend you check them out because that's how I found you, Tom. I was poking around YouTube one day and I saw a couple of YouTube videos on you, and I was like, wow, this guy is talking about everything in selling airplanes. This is awesome. So yeah, check out his YouTube channel. It is great. Tom, again, thanks for being on, and maybe in a year or so we'll have you back on again, and you can give us an update to your business and how much you've grown.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Ernie.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Have a good day.